Howard Estes was a slave until he was 40. His owner, Tom Estes, sent him to California with the promise that after the cattle were sold, Howard could stay and work in the mines until he had $1,000. He was to send the money to Tom Estes in Missouri, receiving in return his freedom papers. He sent the money, but Tom Estes kept it as his because Howard was his slave. Such stories were not uncommon. Howard Estes, a genuine 49er, a term used in California for miners searching for gold in 1849, finally earned enough money working during the California gold rush to buy freedom for himself, his wife Hannah, and children Sylvia and Jackson, and headed to California. Sylvia, the eldest, was then 12 years old. At age 16, she met and married Lewis Stark. Stark was the son of a slaveholder and one of his slaves. He had escaped and he worked his way to California. He and Sylvia had 2 children, Emily and Willis, when they joined the black emigration to Vancouver Island in 1858. After settling in Saanich, the Starks went on to Salt Spring Island, which had just been opened to homesteaders in about 1860. Howard Estes and wife Hannah remained on the farm in Saanich. Sylvia Stark was in every way a true pioneer, living in what was then a beautiful wilderness, isolated at first from other settlers. She had 3 sons and 4 daughters. Willis Stark, the eldest son, had remained on Salt Spring Island looking after the Starks' property.
This photograph of Willis Stark at Stark Homestead on Stark Road, Salt Spring Island, dated 1885, with a photographer unknown, is part of the collection of Mrs. Holloman. The spectator's gaze is constantly moving through the dynamic value of the bushes, the contour of the house, and to the high contrast of Stark's white shirt and the gray tone of the background. Although the original purpose of the photo served to be a documentary rather than a historical art, asking us to appreciate its beauty, the blurring edges of the photograph demands attention into the main figure in the center. As you peer into the historical photograph of Willis Stark, you see a mysterious man covered by a heavy black beard, humbly standing next to a utopian hideaway, a legacy of his and his ancestors' life work. Yet, even though the man seems to stand in an isolated silence, he's inviting, calmly intrigued by the break in his backwards solitariness. It's reminiscent of a family photo, like a father proud of what he has raised and tamed, and a large overgrown family of bush now towering over their father, squeezing together to all fit into frame. Stark is proud that he has conquered the bush, but humbled by its resilience and his ultimate dependency on it. He has spent years battling the wilderness, and yet they live in symbiotic peace. Though a man of the wild, Stark is not naive of the outside world and not unaware of his would-be inferior place within it. He may or may not want to live as a hermit, isolated from the world, but in need for his continued happiness to exist, he is stranded amongst the trees. Perhaps the choice was never his to begin with. History defines us. Sharing the past is the best window to understand the present. The photograph documented Willis Stark's life on Salt Spring Island, and it also reminded the contemporaries the past of African Americans who reside in California and of the pioneers, settlers, hard labor from the primitive conditions of a century ago to the present day, when their descendants live in rural comfort. Though preserving this object that we chose, a trace of history is left for us to remember the past and how we have become who we are today. The type of depiction and documentation has tremendous value in educating our understanding of early pioneers, the lives of free slaves, and ultimately the history of Canada. While the photo may not have been taken with the same intents that we now attribute as naturalized properties of the photo, the landscape-styled piece of art depicts the awe-inspiring beast of British Columbian wilderness. However, as opposed to traditional landscape pieces of art, the man is not insignificant. He personifies the struggle, the fight, and the grit of the early pioneer. He embodies a plague of our society, forced to free himself from its chains. Yet we see the overflowing health and sublime life, though not without struggle, that his isolation has brought him.
In the 19th century, Salt Spring Island became the home to settlers of ex-slaves and free blacks looking to form their own peaceful society out of the reaches of racist societal prejudice and oppression. Willis Stark was one of such Negroes looking to preserve and upkeep his family's land on Salt Spring. The son of an escaped slave, Stark was renowned amongst the scattered locals for skill with a rifle as he was issued a year-round hunting license to rid the island of panthers. Willis' family's history embodies the trials and tribulations that confronted these early black pioneers. His grandfather worked in the California gold rush to buy his family's freedom. His father was an escaped slave who looked north for a better life for his children. However, upon arrival in Salt Spring, the family was met by aggressive natives whom Willis' father had to drive away with his gun as to avoid his death and his family's enslavement.
This is why, when we look at the proud black bushman, we see the pride quietly exuberate from his humbled body. His family has sacrificed their lives for their freedom. Now hidden from societal dangers, they face the wrath of Mother Nature. But they are not to be denied. The determined spirit of an escaped slave does not let them give in to the overwhelming environment. He embraces the land that has given him life, the bush that has hidden him from enslavement.
Through the California gold rush, I saw greener pastures. Land of mine, no chains, no massa. God's country, spiritual hunting with no passer. Life in the city moves much faster. Prefer to fall into the backwoods, but I ain't backwards, will not be captured. With no tractor, I cultivate this land for my mental salvation in this rapture. You may ask what brave man hides as to escape, but you do not comprehend the reality of a panther's fate. A swim for the ocean, not a forgotten lake. See, I cannot fight for love with so much hate. Ashamed to claim the same societal cancer that resides in me? Yesterday I killed the same panther that's inside of me. See, I do not fight for this world to accept me. I dream of freedom, hoping this world will forget me.